Hi, everyone. I am Michele Cynowicz, and this is Shifting to Vue. So I work as a front-end engineer for Vox Media, and if you've never heard of Vox Media, you may have heard of some of these journalistic outlets which Vox Media powers. I work for the internal tooling that help publishers, journalists, and video producers make content for these websites. Disclaimer for this talk, I am going to be talking about VueJS, but I am also going to be talking about Vue templates, model Vue controllers, and I will try very hard to say VueJS to be distinctive, but please try and follow along and forgive me if I forget the JS part at any point in this talk. So I am a front-end engineer, but I work for an enterprise-level company now, but when I started my career, I was a freelancer, and it was fun to make a new website, and you get to spin up from scratch, and people just need like a whole package, and you're one and done, and you move on. But for the last 10 years, I've been working for enterprise companies where I join the company, and I jump on a team where they have a legacy application that is big, it's clunky, there's a lot going on, and I'm just dealing with the front end and the user experience. So when we start these web applications in their infancy, when they're baby apps, we have an established MVC architecture, that's Model View Controller, and they're built on standard CRUD interface, which is a create, read, update, delete application. So I've made a little example right here of a baby app in Rails. And here is my empty database that accepts one member registry. And then I submit, and voila, my URL changes, and now I can see the contents of my member registry. Pretty simple and very fast. Very fast because I only have 3 fields and I only have 1 record. But what happens when that little tiny baby app needs to scale and be enterprise level? We are going to add more robust forms, more fields, more options. We're going to have data tables where we pull those fields and options from. We might add searchable and filterable index screens where people can search for what they're looking for and dig down into tons and tons of data to find the data that they need. We may have multi-level user permissions. We need to give people read-only access or write access, admin access, and we have to stop people from performing certain functions. And then the one that always gets me is we have to add layers of DOM manipulation and AJAX requests so that the screen will update for the user without reloading the entire page. And this is my history with JavaScript and AJAX, and everybody just wants user faces with more zing, right? So what happens is people love that stuff. It's like, yay, it's fast, and it doesn't refresh, and I don't have to wait for the page load, and then they ask for it again, and they ask for it again and again and again and again until it becomes unmanageable at scale. So what do? We had an app, CV, classic Rails app, several years old, hundreds of users, multiple third-party API connections, authentications, automated services running daily. And how would we improve this UX? How would we do it quickly? How would we do it for all of our current and active users and future users without tearing the whole thing down and building an entirely new app? So we worked with Rails, and Rails is a convention-based framework. And if you've ever heard people say Rails magic, it's because a lot of it is not configured. You don't get to customize it. It works right out of the package, which is great, but you have to know where things are in order to customize it. And here we're looking at adding a reactive JavaScript framework, which is essentially a framework on top of a framework. And standalone, both of these things kind of do the same thing, but VueJS lets you configure where Rails doesn't. So a build setup for a Rails app gives you a template compiler, and Rails itself is its own syntax for your Vue, V-I-E-W. And then we have Ruby Gems, that's your ecosystem for plugins and libraries. It has something called an asset pipeline. I'm not going to get into exactly what an asset pipeline is, but it's comparable to a build tool or a continuous integration that builds your assets for you out of piecemeal assets. An active record, which is a way of manipulating data within a Rails app. And then we have VueJS, which we can compare. We have Webpack for compiling. We have node packages for our ecosystem. And again, we have Webpack, which we're going to use for our build tool. And then we have Vuex for state management on the front end, which is, again, how you kind of manipulate data with Vue. But since I'm on a time limit, I will not get to go into Vuex for state management. Now, the convenient thing is that all of these things fit into a single Ruby gem called Webpacker, and we can install that into our gem file, and we will be able to fit VueJS as a framework right in there with Rails, and it's a perfect fit. So we can go into the gem file and add our Webpacker gem. We can bundle that up, and then we can run a Webpacker installation. And then from there, we can run a VueJS installation. So a Rails scaffold, standard Rails scaffold, looks like this. We have an assets directory, and you'll notice inside of there is a JavaScript directory. And we would put our partials for JavaScript and our partials of style sheets within these individual directories. And the asset pipeline will be able to compile all that for us automatically with Rails right out of the box. When we go down here, we have controllers and we have views. And we use controllers and views in Rails for template rendering. So that's how we make our front end work. But once we run a Webpacker installation, something changes in our convention, in our structure. When we run that Webpacker install, we get a new directory called JavaScript. And if you'll note up here, we have JavaScripts and we have JavaScript, which can get a little confusing when your directory starts to get crazy. But everything that's inside of that JavaScript directory is going to be run by Webpacker. And everything in the packs directory, right there, will be using something called packs tags. And with Rails templates, we can go ahead and put in a pack tag for rendering. And that goes right into your Vue templates, your Rails views, to give you standalone JavaScript features. So there we go. So now what happens when we get a VueJS installation? We run the installation and we get a little bit more. We get an application.js will now feature our VueJS needs. We'll get a secondary component for Hello VueJS so that you can test it out, see that it's working. But you'll get this parent component for your VueJS work, which is the app.vue single file VueJS component. Confused yet? So let's look at that confusing thing that I said has the same kind of name as the other thing. I said that Rails is convention and VueJS is configuration, but you get this configuration partially from Webpacker itself. So we can configure this with Webpacker, which is one of my favorite parts about using VueJS, is that I'm not beholden to the convention anymore. So we can go in here, and in the Webpacker YAML file, I can just update the name of that directory from JavaScript to front end, which I did in my actual project. And then from here, I can go ahead and I can change the name of that JavaScript directory to front end. Right? And while I have it open, I'll go ahead and add a components directory and a new file. And this new file is going to be a VueJS single file template. I'm going to call it global nav. Why am I going to call it global nav? Oh, wrong button. I'm going to call it global nav because this is going to be a shared component. So what you're looking at on the screen right now is my old application. So it comes with a navigation that needs to be replaced and a legacy user experience that we want to rewrite with single page application speed. But this is what I want my new UI to look like. And I want to have this new navigation, but I want it to exist, this global nav, on both my beta user experience, which will be my single page app, that's my SPA, but I also want to maintain my legacy user experience for my current and legacy users. So this new navigation that's to be shared will appear on both user experiences, but it's one component. And you're going to see how I do that, how I maintain that user experience for legacy users while also peppering that legacy user experience with VueJS components. So here is the nav, the global nav. It is one component to rule them all. And we're going to set that up for 2 user experiences. So we'll start with that components directory where I put in global nav.view. And let's take a look at my layouts. I've made a new layout, and I'm calling that beta. And to avoid confusion here, I'm renaming my application HTML ERB file, which is standard convention for Rails. I'm renaming it to legacy. You can do this, and yes, it will reorganize your files alphabetically once you do that. You can do this in Rails, but it's a convention thing, not easy to configure. I'm not going to have time to go over that today. And now we're going to set this up for Webpacker packs. Now this you saw before. This is what my original installation looked like, and that is the JavaScript pack tag application. So now I've changed it, and it has a little bit of a new directory structure, a new name, front end, but I'm still going to call it the JavaScript pack tag. So I have a new and improved directory name, but I have the same great Rails syntax. So now I'm adding a new pack, and I'm calling it legacy header. And I can drop that into my Rails view templates, again with the JavaScript pack tag, and then I will just call the argument legacy header, which is the file name. And then let's look at what goes on in packs, like what happens. So when we use Webpacker in this Rails app, we are giving the ability to use ES6 flavored JavaScript imports into the parent directory front end. This won't affect anything outside of the front end directory. Everything has to be inside this front end. So first we have standard library imports. And in here we're importing the app.view component, right? And down here at the bottom, we mount this app.view component to the DOM at an element that has an ID called app. Now, this whole pack, this application.js pack, will serve our new beta, our VueJS-powered single-page application. And there it is. That is the parent component for the whole single-page app. App.view will be the home for all of the VueJS components that we do build when they exist within the single-page application. And you're probably looking at that and saying, sweet sugary syntax, what is that? This is supposed to be a reactive framework. Why are we adding a document add event listener when the DOM content is loaded? Don't we not need that because we're using a JavaScript framework? And the answer is, this handles race conditions for loading in a Rails view. If you were just to build a VueJS application without it being wedged into a Rails app, you would not need this. This is Rails specific or framework specific outside of VueJS itself. So now let's look at the legacy header.js pack that I created. It has the same standard library imports, but now we're registering just the single component global nav.view. And now we have the view instance here that serves just one component. I'm not going to put any components inside of global nav.view. It will live by itself in one space, and it will be a child of app.view in another. So there it is. And this means that our legacy header pack can be dropped into any Rails Vue template on its own by itself. So let's see that sweet component. So here we are, global nav. And up here I have some VueJS syntax in my Vue component. And this has a click.prevent go home function. Now, this is a function. It's a method, and it exists within the same Vue component, VueJS component. And in a VueJS component, you get a template tag, a script tag, and a style tag, all in the same file. So this method exists down below, but we're referencing it up here with our @click, and it has a condition in it. So anytime somebody clicks that, it's going to run the go home method, and it's going to decide if this is the legacy user experience. We're going to show the legacy, we're showing the legacy version of the global nav, but we're changing where the click of the logo takes you. So the click of the logo takes you to the original root of the application if you're in legacy. Otherwise, you must be in our new single-page beta application, and that way we are going to use something called Vue Router, which changes what you see, but does not change your window location because your page does not reload. So we pepper this file with a few specific conditions that give us things like if is legacy, we get the old logo. Else, we get the new logo. Same thing with the text. And down here, we have a new project button. And we do a little in-template logic to decide where the user will go and if they're allowed to click on this based on, are they in legacy or are they in beta? So now we want to place our pack tags. So we have a beta Rails Vue layout. And normally what you will see in a Rails Vue layout is the body yield. And the yield tag basically pulls in from elsewhere in the structure partial templates that build up the whole page. So what we're going to do here in beta is we're going to get rid of that yield because we don't want any other Rails templates to show up. We're going to build a JavaScript pack tag, and we're going to use that application.js pack. And that loads in the app.vue component, mounts it to the app element, and now we have the housing for our single page application, and we can control everything else from within the front end directory with VueJS. Now let's look at legacy. Legacy, we still want some of our Rails templates to show up. We just want the header to be the Vue component that we've built. So here I can just pop in the JavaScript pack tag and call in the legacy header file, and that will bind the global nav component directly to this Vue template. So now we have two user experiences. We have the beta, the single page, that has the global nav.vue on top. So this is what the structure looks like. We use the beta Rails template for layout. We call in the JavaScript pack tag for application.js. Application.js mounts the app.vue component, and then the app.vue component calls in the global nav.vue component inside of it. So here we can add all new components to the app.vue component for our single page application experience. And now we have our legacy user experience, which still has users. And then here we can call in our legacy header pack tag just for the global nav component without the rest of the single page application. And then I still have my yield where I can bring in all of my Rails templates. Something of note here is that this becomes a process that we can pepper and create new packs for all of our new VueJS components and add them in piecemeal to the legacy application for slow changes to the user experience so that our legacy users can become accustomed to each of these pieces that we will now build before we finally decide to flip a switch and say, hey, now you get the whole single-page app experience. So thank you all for listening. I hope I didn't go too fast. If you have any questions, you want to talk about state management or Rails, or you want to complain about Rails, I'm totally here for that. And that's it for me.